Where the local authority team is still in place, I could see the impact on the schools. Lots of the schools said, oh, we've got this fantastic consultant, they come around, we've been on these training courses. So, you know, in areas where there were specialist staff, all the schools I visited were positive about the support they'd had from local authority teams. I met a lot of unqualified staff. I mean, I'm not talking about class and subject teachers, I'm talking about EAL teaching assistants usually, who were in the role of leading EAL in a particular school, even though they were a teaching assistant who might have had the one twilight course. And I think they are therefore very restricted because of not having the qualifications. They cannot actually challenge any practice at all in the school. And, you know, fantastic teaching assistants, totally committed people, very valued by the pupils. I remember talking to a teaching assistant in a school on Stoke-on-Trent, who the children clearly loved her and they were getting a lot of help and support from her, but she had absolutely no links within the management structure of the school. She'd had no professional development herself, although she was quite experienced. Interestingly, that school, about 6 months later, I found had gone into special measures. So there were clearly issues about the way in which language and literacy was managed across the whole school. That it was much, much bigger than dealing with a teaching assistant dealing with beginners. And I'm interested to pick up on what Nicola said about grammar, and that she picked up on the fact that grammar training has been a hook with which to sell EAL training, for want of a better word. I actually talked to a secondary head of English who said to me, the trouble is, I can't teach grammar, I'm an English literature teacher, I'm not an English language teacher. And I've heard that in quite a lot of places, that it's actually the English department themselves do not feel confident to lead on grammar, in secondary schools in particular. This issue around talking about language is not possible in a lot of secondary contexts. It's not something they're familiar with, and that is also sometimes not even the English department. I've found that it was more often than not the modern foreign languages department that would lead this in a school and offer the sort of twilight grammar training or whatever it was said. The ESOL methods and the resources, as well as the Google Translate method. The other one is, we've got this really good ELT book called Headway. I've seen Headway in more schools than anywhere else. I saw a teacher in a Bedfordshire middle school teaching a lesson from Headway about ordering food in a restaurant to some newly arrived Lithuanian and Polish children. I was slightly wondering how it was going to help them in their SATs, being able to order, can I have whatever it was, a smoked salmon sandwich, please? and this is what really frightens me in terms of the CPD, because it's not getting through, particularly not getting through in the more, I wouldn't say rural areas, but the sort of fringes, the fringe areas. I did see some good practice. It wasn't all doom and gloom. I saw a fantastic geography lesson in a Bristol secondary school where the geography teacher had literacy and explanation writing completely embedded and drew in all the bilingual children in the class, making sure that they were producing high quality speech before they wrote anything down. He was very focused on the production of the oral production. He really knew what he was doing, so that was really good news. I saw a fantastic literacy lesson in the Mid Wales primary school I mentioned, with a Chinese beginner using an iPad in the lesson to do exactly the same as the rest of the children were doing, translating from her language into English and then back again in order to communicate with the rest of the class. That was great. And actually one of the best lessons I saw was a withdrawal group with an EAL teacher in Glasgow, and I must put in a good word for Glasgow. Those of us who are in England maybe don't hear very much about what's going on in Scotland, but they have a fantastically professional EAL service that works citywide, well led, lots of training, high quality training, And if you ever want to go and see how to do it really well, I recommend a visit to Glasgow. It was a great lesson. It was a withdrawal group, but she'd linked with the class teacher. She was teaching a science content lesson to year 5s. She had a lot of Roma Slovak children. They were making incredibly good progress. In that hour that I sat with them, they were all completely engaged. It was really wonderful. Briefly, what are we going to do about it? The fragmentation, I found exactly the same. The teachers who did reply to our general survey mostly reported that their initial teacher education was not useful at all, or barely useful. There are some very high quality postgraduate courses in some areas of the country, but not everywhere. What happens, as the teacher said to me the other day, say, I'm working in Suffolk, where do I go to get high-level postgraduate teacher training? You know, I want to be a highly qualified specialist EAL learner. I think the distance learning is something that we're really going to have to look into. There are not that many distance learning EAL training courses. And some areas just have no access to training. The poor teacher in Mid Wales had a master's in applied linguistics. She knew a lot about language already. She wanted to have more appropriate training for working in the UK. But what do you do if you're in Mid Wales? It's 2 hours drive probably to the nearest training provider. Really difficult one. And exactly same comment as NALDIC have made, we don't have a framework. We don't have a framework that develops the skills of teachers from beginner NQT to advanced skills teacher to specialist in language across the curriculum or whatever it might be in whatever context it might be. There is some great practice. It's often at local authority level. Hampshire is, for example, running a MA module in conjunction with University of Winchester. Gwent do the same in conjunction with University of South Wales. We have a very, very strong local authority network in the northwest under the umbrella of NASI, because it's a group of local authorities working together. I think this is a model that would be great if we could get up and running across London again to actually provide something that covers a whole sort of urban conglomeration. And also, there is a registration system in Scotland, for example, where the teachers have to register with a subject qualification. You can't employ an unqualified teaching assistant to teach. So I think that there are, what I've seen fits very well into some of the NALDIC findings, and also I think possibly links quite closely with some of the things that Carter has said in his review as well. Interestingly, I had an email the other day from a drama student at Northern Metropolitan University asking me, he said, I'm going to do a 20-minute session on EAL learners with my peers next week. What do you advise? And I get emails like that a lot via my private website, and it was really lovely, actually, to get something where he himself was bilingual, and he said, should I use my bilingual skills to help train the others? And I said, yes, of course you must, absolutely. And of course, use your drama skills as well, and he was really excited when I validated what he wanted to do. So there are keen young teachers out there who are absolutely focused on EAL and wanting to do the right thing. We've got to capture them and use them a lot more effectively. Endorse what NALDIC said about needing to provide differentiated courses, particularly around the leadership and management issues, because actually, unless the leaders know what they're looking for when they're putting job advertisements in the paper, you get the endless advertisements that says you will need to be enthusiastic, driven and personable, and work with students with EAL and special needs, and a number of students who expect a wide range of emotional and social and behavioural difficulties, and you will work cross-curricular at Key Stage 3 and 4 on literacy and numeracy, and you will work within the special needs department and be experienced to provide effective and supportive leadership. And that was a teaching assistant salary of about 18,000 a year. Yeah? So that's what they're looking for. The profession is dying, lots of us are getting older. Nice to see some young faces here for a change. I do think teacher education for EAL is a postcode lottery, despite the teacher standards. And I'm very worried about the lack of training for teaching assistants, particularly bilingual teaching assistants. So I think that very much matches with what the NALDIC findings would be. My recommendations are very similar. I'm particularly thinking that we need to strengthen provision for the more isolated, rural, distant parts of the UK. I also think we need to do a lot more research as to what's going on in the SCITs and school-based training providers. I haven't got very much evidence of this, mostly anecdotal evidence of this, but it is incredibly variable. I do think there needs to be a much more wider strengthening of regional networks, again to support the people in the southwest, for example, who find it very difficult to access some of the existing networks. I've thrown in EAL assessment there, partly because, again, wherever I went, people said, what should we be doing about EAL assessment? And I think this needs to come into the training hugely. I think the two need to be linked in some way, because it's very much on the agenda nationally. Teacher development framework, yes, progression, but something for class and subject teachers that is meaningful for them to apply. Not just theory, something really embedded in practice. They need to see it in action. And finally, a little word for social media, because I've only just getting my head around this somewhat late in life. There are others in the room who are much more confident than I am, but it is a way of reaching people that you can't reach any other way. And I think the more we talk in the online world to each other, the more our conversations will get picked up by people who might not otherwise be listening. So I think if we can get a lot of this debate going on #EAL chat, it might go somewhere. Okay.
Thank you, Catherine.